Like, the difference between a person at a college campus who's dressed whatever, you can assume he has a rational mind, versus there's an all-knowing being that's lives in the sky that is, like, has made everything.
What if I just say, oh, I fly, and then you don't believe me? Then what do? I wrote it in a book, I flew.
Great. Well, if you go to the top of the library, jump off and fly to that building over there, I'll believe that you fly. But if you jump off that building and splatter all over the cement, I'm going to know you don't fly.
If I get 100 people to say that I flew, then would you believe me? But you weren't there. If I got 1,000 people to say that I flew, would you believe me if I wasn't there?
That would definitely give you more credibility. But no, I would ask, what are these people gaining by saying that they saw you fly? Have you simply deceived them in some magical way?
What if everyone's purpose is just to deceive you? So I get 10,000 people, and they're all their purpose is just to deceive you, to tell you that I fly. But to you, I'm credible because I got eyewitnesses.
Eyewitnesses can get you thrown into prison.
Yeah.
Not many of them, right? But I can promise you, if you told me that you flew on your own, unaided by an airplane or a parachute or whatever, I would be skeptical, but I'd be open to saying, okay, what's the evidence? How many people think that you, Shad, have flown?
Well, no, none. But I don't have the sources right now. But I'm saying hypothetically, if I got 10,000 people to say that I flew, would you believe that I flew?
Shad, I think it's very dangerous to try and live in the hypothetical world.
Prove hypothetical.
So right about now, I got to make a decision. Is he hypothetically here, or is he physically, literally here? And if he's physically, literally here, my fist better stop right there. See, I don't live in this hypothetical world that says, well, hypothetically, he might be a dream I'm having right now. So therefore, I can just keep swinging. No, the overwhelming evidence is he is standing here. That's why my fist better stop here.
Yeah, you can't see Jesus Christ, and you didn't know that he was revived from the dead. You were just getting that from account witnesses written in the Bible.
I never saw George Washington. I never saw Napoleon. I never saw Plato or Socrates. But historical knowledge written by eyewitnesses is a credible form of knowledge. That's why you have a history department here at UConn. Because historical knowledge, which has nothing to do with repeatability, we don't get Washington back and get him inaugurated first president of the United States every fall so that all you UConn students can say, oh, I get it. Washington really was a first president of the United States because he just was inaugurated in my classroom. No. Instead, you study eyewitness documents, American history, and you come to understand our first president was George Washington.
I'm not arguing that Jesus Christ wasn't real. So you can I'm not arguing that George Washington isn't real. But if all the accounts on George Washington was real, I would disagree about that. I'm sure there's something about George Washington that documented accounts got wrong.
Good.
That's not real.
Legends grew up around George Washington. Therefore, we better learn how to distinguish between historical narrative and legend. And they are different. Very different.
If you choose, why did you choose this one? Why not the Book of Mormon? Why not the Korah? Why not why you choose this? Why this one? Why is this one right and everything else wrong?
Because when you read about Joseph Smith, who started the Mormon Church, and when you read about his claims, there is so much internal contradiction.
I could say the same thing about your work.
Good. Then give me one example of how Christ contradicted himself.
Infinite things. Hold
Good.
on.
Well, I'm going to be out here for a few hours today, so why don't you go find your contradiction of Christ and bring it out here? You can't accept the contradictions of Joseph Smith, but you do insist, although you don't have an example right now, that Christ contradicted himself.
I'm working on it.
Okay, good. Keep working. Be an open-minded thinker.
Can God be seen by man? In John 4:12, or however you pronounce it, no one has ever seen God. In Timothy 6:16, no man has seen or can see God. But then there's also the story of Abraham seeing God. That's one example. There's also a lot of examples with incest of contradictions. How are some contradictions just context and some just diametrically opposed to what other books say?
Okay, what does it mean when I say that I have seen God in the first century and saw Jesus? I saw God in human form. But no, no one has ever seen the Father.
Like, how do you decide what parts of the Bible you follow? Like, different, like, rules that you follow through the Bible of,
Yeah.
like, if you're, I don't know the exact quote or whatever, but there's a whole thing about how, like, if your brother dies with the wife, you must implant your seed in her to have the children or something like that. I can find the actual writing. But, like, what do you decide is real and what's just a metaphor of life?
If you can't answer that question, you will flunk out of this place. You will flunk your English class and you'll flunk your biology class.
But you're using the book as a scientific explanation for what.
No, I am not. There is no
So you're saying
science in the Bible. Let's all say it together.
So-
there is no science in the Bible. That is why if anybody says to you, science contradicts the Bible, they either haven't read the Bible or they don't know what science is.
there's nothing behind it. Why should I believe it?
Why should you believe the Bible?
Sure. Why is this specific writing with very little physical evidence from the past something I should accept as true?
Archaeology supports the names of places, the names of Roman rulers listed in the New Testament, because archaeology supports the Pool of Bethesda, the Pool of Siloam.
Some of these people might have existed, but there's no evidence that shows the parts of the Bible that are like give the power and that like are above human.
Oh my goodness. You can't scientifically prove God. Why? Because God is not a physical object. God is a spiritual being. Therefore, science has no answer to the question, does God exist or not? Because science only deals with what you can observe and repeat. And if you can't observe it, and if you can't repeat it, it ain't science. But guess what? If you tell me that the only way you can know truth is through science, you are naive, gullible, and ignorant.
Then I'm all of those things. Why
All right,
do you
you
say
are.
That's not science. What?
Prove to me that he has a rational mind. Scientifically prove it.
You can look at a CAT scan, look at his brain, and use the information from that to determine.
Hey, you don't know that's a brain. It's mush between his two ears. You know very well why you accept he has a rational mind. Because look how he's dressed. Listen to him speak in an articulate fashion. That articulate speech of his doesn't come about by chance. It shows me that there's a rational mind between his two handsome ears. Similarly, I can't grab hold of God, put God in a test tube and say, oh, now I've proven that God exists. That's impossible, because God is not a physical being.
The difference between a person at a college campus who's dressed whatever, you can assume he has a rational mind, versus there's an all-knowing being that's lives in the sky that is like has made everything. There's much bigger jump than just someone has a rational mind.
That's right. You can't see God, therefore God doesn't
That's not
exist.
my line of thinking.
I
My line
can't
of
see his
thinking
mind.
was there was
It
no
doesn't mean his mind doesn't
evidence of
exist.
any-
I gotta look for other evidence.
There's no proof of him. All you have is this one book, and there's books that say a ton of shit. You don't trust all of that.
I don't believe in God, that God exists, because the book tells me.
Why do you attribute it to him, though? Why do you
Because
attribute
if
all
there
that to
is
God?
no God, love, meaning, and morality are a crapshoot. They're all relative. You create them in your head, because if there is no mind prior to the human mind, then who creates right and wrong? We do.
So are you saying
If there is no mind prior to the human mind, who creates love? We do. Which means love and meaning and morality are totally relative depending upon which mind you're talking to.
But where I kind of like lose it is in a lot of just the verse of the Bible. There's a ton of stuff that just is just wrong, and just like an example I was looking at was the idea that or just like partially out of date but partially just like morally wrong. And so like there's the whole thing about like go and sleep with your brother's widow in the duty of a brother-in-law to keep your brother's line alive, but Onan knew that the child would not be his own, so whenever he slept with his brother's widow, he spilled his semen on the ground, blah, blah, blah. And so my whole thing is, like, I agree with the core idea of be a good person, all that, but I just think that the Bible, and there's a bunch of other religions that have those similar ideas of being a good person, but where I don't get with the Bible is there's so much in it that has either been like said, well, you can't take that part literally, or it doesn't actually mean that, or that like there's stuff in it that still is slowly becoming less socially accepted as morally correct. So why is you drawing drawing from the Bible when a lot of the Bible, the core idea is, but the details are getting fuzzy?
Well, so from an atheist perspective, I'm going to answer your question. Why did I hear you say, this is good, this is not good, this is moral, this is not moral, this is ethical, this is not ethical? From an atheistic perspective, it's all morally relative. So how can you stand here and say, this is moral and this is not immoral, this is ethical and this is not ethical?
I think the idea of morality, and that morality is drawn from God or religion or whatever, right? And atheists aren't going around killing people. They have moral, and they don't necessarily believe in a higher being or an afterlife that is drawing you to be more moral.
Right.
Or like animals, there's certain societal structures that are built up through multiple species and different religious groups and all that are more just biological and like, I don't know what the word is, but just like apes react very similar to humans, and we found there's a lot of like evolutionary similarities, but they don't go to church. They don't believe in necessarily, that we know of, at least, a God. So like, why is there that connection?
Well, I see evolutionary theory is all raised red in tooth and claw. It's all about the strong eating the weak. So to pull a type of moral goodness and beauty and your desire for love from evolution, that is a serious stretch.
There's parallels in how...
Yes, there's parallels.
So, but then...
Altruism, some of altruism, yes, agreed.
So then, and back to my more like original question of like, the Bible has all these things that have either been revised or said, in the translations it's changed, whatever. Why does the Bible is being referred back to when there's just the basic idea of be a good person, do good things, and that is kind of what I feel like religion should be more centrally based on? Why should I believe that the parts of the Bible as well build on top of that?
Okay, so I would start with the Gospels. Even secular would say he was a historical figure.
Yes,
okay, what were his teachings like? Were they the teachings of a madman or somebody who could potentially be God? What was his lifestyle like? His own family and even the Roman soldiers at one point fell down by his teachings and lifestyle. I don't think, just like Bono said of U2, I don't think a schizophrenic who would claim to be God, as a therapist I see people claim to be God who are schizophrenic, sadly, he would be in that camp. Do you think a schizophrenic could change 34% of the world? Unlikely, potentially. And so starting there is important, bro. I wouldn't hop to, is there a talking snake? Or Jonah in the belly of a whale, because this is way closer, and there's way more historical documentation here. But more to your point, I'm getting there. I keep hearing you talking about religion. Cliff would never say religion brings about this, and somehow religious people are better than atheist people. No, it's about, is there a transcendent source that says this is objectively good, this is objectively evil? And if you have no transcendent, moral, obligatory source to say that, then it's all just, your truth is your truth. My truth is mine. If there's tremendous evil out there, whether it's the abuse of an innocent child, or whether it's the abuse of a puppy by letting its tail on fire, I can say from my perspective, well, that's not really wrong. I don't really like it, but that's not evil or anything like that. While you could say, no, that's tremendously evil. So lastly, and more pointedly to your point, yes, there are difficult passages in the Old Testament. Totally agree. We were with this atheist, very big atheist on his podcast yesterday, who was a secular Jew, who kept pushing this on us. But I would always go back to Matthew chapter 19, where no longer, Jesus says about Moses' law, can you give a spouse a certificate of divorce. So no longer is marriage just contractual, where it's, you know what, you're kind of in my way, I'm going to divorce you right now. No, Jesus says now it's all about sacrificing for your spouse, and you have to stay together unless there's adultery, desertion, or abuse. And so he's tightening the noose. Yes, he's moving with culture and making things more humane, absolutely. But he jives with culture in such a way where it's an ancient Near Eastern brutish culture. And so absolutely some of the laws are brutish and he fits with the culture. And yet the Israelites are always more humane. They're always a step ahead. For example, when it comes to the tough part of slavery, if you are to captive, Leviticus talks about, if you are to capture a human being and enslave them, you're to be put to death.
Wouldn't a lot of that just come with like social structures and the fact that society would fall apart without these social structures? Like drawing that from like the morality, how much of it is morality and how much of it is the idea that if like eye for an eye, everyone goes around killing each other, society will fall in maintaining and preserving society versus the idea of morals.
The fabric of the universe, you better jive with it. And if you don't, imprisonment's going to happen. All kinds of family breakdown is going to happen if we live selfish lives. But if there is no God, I agree with you. Atheists, and so would Dostoevsky, atheists can still be good people. That's not the weight of his argument. The weight of his argument when he says, if you do not believe in God, do whatever you want, he's saying there's no moral obligation. Or maybe someone a little more recent. Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer, who cannibalized as well. He put it perfectly on his CBS News, from his jail cell. CBS News, when they went in and they interviewed him, he said, oh yeah, I was just killing and eating people because it jived with my own desires, and we live in a godless society, so there's no moral objectivity. Okay, that's a serial killer who's eating people, and he understands it more than the typical atheist understands morality.
But I feel like that's taking it to an extreme.
All the top atheist philosophers take it to an extreme in the sense of they're trying to get you to think, and they're saying, be consistent. That's why Nietzsche went to the point of saying, I really despise my atheist friends who are living for compassion, love, sacrificing for another. That does not jive with atheism at all. They're being inconsistent.
All of what you guys are saying is going back to like, okay, well, don't take it so literally. It's more this idea, and you're personally drawing that from the Bible and not the actual word itself, while also talking about the historical backing, but also expanding and drawing meaning from something that you're using as a I'm not articulating it well, but
I never turn to the Bible to answer the question, does God exist?
yes.
The Bible, for me, has nothing to do with that question. But the second question, who is Jesus Christ? Well, obviously the Bible, the New Testament, has everything to do with that. Why? Because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the historical eyewitness accounts of how Jesus lived, what he taught, how he died, and how he rose from the dead. And no, I don't want you to go walking into some church that has a picture of Jesus who has blonde hair and blue eyes and is carrying an American flag, because that ain't the real Jesus. And I don't want you to go to some place that's going to talk to you about how Jesus was a Republican or that he was a Democrat. False. Jesus was not a Republican or a Democrat. So what do I want you to do? Be honest intellectually. Go to the source documents. Now, if it's Muhammad, you go to the Quran. You don't go to the Bible, you go to the Quran. And if it's Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, you don't go to the Bible, you go to the teachings of Buddha. And if it's Jesus Christ, you go to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, read them for yourself, and ask yourself, does the evidence point to Christ being reliable or not?
Using the Bible to, because it's out of date, using it to, well, what would he have thought? Or what would, all that. I feel like it's just, it's become taking on a whole new life outside of the original text.
I was at Harvard, and a student stepped out of the crowd and said, you Christians, you got it all real simple and easy. All right? All you got to do every time you make a difficult ethical decision is go running to your magical book, the Bible, and there God tells you what to do. And I said, sir, you got to be kidding me. My wife and I are building a house right now. In light of the fact that people are starving to death today, and we have the solution for starvation. Money, buy food, feed starving people. How much money should we put into our house, and how much should we give away to starving people? And if you think I go running to my magical book, the Bible, and there God tells me whether to buy a Kenmore or a Westinghouse dishwasher, you're out to lunch. I have to struggle existentially, ethically through the issue. How much money should I keep for myself, invest in my house, and how much should I give away to feed starving children? The vast majority of ethical decisions are not answered directly by the Bible. Now, there are principles, yes. Love God with your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Whoa, that's difficult stuff. Attacking racism with a parable of the Good Samaritan. As a Samaritan gets down on his hands and knees and cleans out the cuts and bandages the wounds of a Jew. So yes, the basic principles are there, but then we got to flesh life out in the nitty-gritty of everyday life. And that requires prayer. It requires a relationship with Christ. because the Bible's not going to answer all those questions specifically.
All right, well, I'm just going to say, I feel like I've talked way too much.
No, you
So
have
what I'll
not.
say-
I like you.
All right, so what I'll say is, I think I've realized through this conversation that we agree on more than I thought we would,
All right.
but I'll let other people talk, so thank you.
All right, but I have a request.
Yes.
Let somebody else talk, but then you hop right back in.
I got class.
All right, you bet, man. Go to class, but
Thank you.
maybe we'll see you tomorrow.
Oh, boy.
How are you able to read the Bible and know that your interpretation is correct?
You have to have a great deal of humility and to acknowledge my interpretation could be wrong.
No matter like how you put it, like so many people will try to humble themselves and have humility when reading the Bible and putting it in context.
Right.
Different interpretations will come up
Yes.
and disagreements will come along, and that's how like the different denominations
Right.
came along.
Yep.
So how can you make certain that yours is correct? And
What I can do with you is explain why I interpret the way I do, and then if you disagree with me, I will challenge you in the same way that you will challenge me to read more accurately, to interpret more precisely. But bottom line is, you make your decision, you got to make up your life, I make my decision, I got to make up my life. And I got a ton of friends who say, Cliff, you're misinterpreting the Gospels. Jesus is not God. He's a good teacher. And I say, I'm sorry, there is no way that I can read the Gospels and see how by both his words and his actions, Jesus claims to be God, and conclude, oh no, he was just a good teacher. It's impossible for me. That would be intellectual suicide. The same way I cannot read the Quran and say, oh, Muhammad really thought Jesus was God in human form. That's my interpretation. No, that's a false interpretation. Muhammad made it very clear, Jesus is not God. Now, I respect him. I've got to read that honestly, and then I got to decide, is he accurate or not?
but then what about the Orthodox Church Fathers?
No. The Orthodox Church Fathers did not put together the Bible. No, sir. From Rome, Italy, down through Antioch, Jerusalem, down to Alexandria, Egypt, it was the worldwide church that agreed what books would be included in the New Testament canon and what would be excluded. So no church fathers made that decision. They were part of it, but there was no council that decided we're going to accept these books, we're going to reject those. That was a decision by the worldwide church. In fact, that was one of the criteria that had to be met by these books, that it was accepted universally, not just by the church in Alexandria or the church in Antioch or the church in Ephesus.
But can you go to heaven without believing directly in God? Because I don't know. Whenever I would learn, you have to put all your belief in, but you can't believe in something that you don't already believe in. If you go back to your example before, you could believe he's like not real, but I messed up my car. You don't have to.
Sorry, take your time.
I'm
Okay.
doing a bad job of explaining this. You can't make yourself believe in something. You know what I
Can't
mean?
make yourself believe in something.
If you don't-
Correct, I agree.
So if you were born and raised not believing in God,
Yeah.
how are you supposed to transition into becoming a believer?
Are you trying to maintain that you believe today everything that you were taught as a little kid?
No.
Good. So you don't have to believe what mommy and daddy taught you. You have a mind, you have a will, which is a free will, and you decide what you believe.
But if you have any doubt, you don't get to go to heaven.
No, I have doubt all the time. Everybody has doubts. Nobody can prove God or prove Christ. I sure can't, so I struggle with doubts regularly. The question is, what do you do with your doubts? Do you let your doubts harden into unbelief, or do you allow your doubts to motivate you to more closely examine Christ, the evidence? Are you willing to doubt your doubts? I have far too many people who say to me, Cliff, I can't believe because I doubt. And I say, you're wrong, sir. We all have doubts. I got doubts. I can't prove to you that God exists. I can't prove to you that Christ rose from the dead. The evidence is God exists. The evidence is that Jesus rose from the dead. But I can't prove any of that, so I struggle with doubt.
If you trust that what God is saying is true and you follow his guidelines, then is that more important than the actual belief?
When you read the Gospels, you'll notice Christ called people to believe in him, not it. He called people to himself. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Me, not it. So first of all, faith in Christ is personal trust in Him. Then, if my faith is sincere and genuine, yes, I will seek to obey Him.
Why didn't God ever show himself before Jesus?
Well, God did show himself, actually, in many ways, more vividly before Jesus. You talk to Moses, the patriarchs. Yes, God had to turn his back to them because he was a holy God. And if they actually saw him physically, his face, because he was so holy and good and they're so sinful and broken, they would be judged in a way where they just couldn't handle it, right? So he appears in a theophany. Simply a theophany is he appears in different forms. So a pillar, a cloud once, a strong wind once, a fire once, an earthquake once, the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3 once. So there's all kinds of encounters, and people actually hear the voice of God in the Old Testament. But you're right, in the sense of you and me right now, that's Jesus Christ. He actually was
Like a
physical being. And so that's why, though, the patriarchs and even Rahab, the Gentile prostitute, Hebrews chapter 11, they're going to be in heaven even though they never met Jesus. Because they encountered God, they believed in God. They took that step of humility and said, I am not God, money's not God, my nation is not God. But no, there's a God out there. So that's why Romans chapter 1 and 2, Paul says, and so as Descartes said it later on, nobody is without excuse. There's no excuse to not believe in God because the beauty and creativity of nature and because our moral conscience within, and that's the objective morality piece that we said. And so lastly, I believe that Jesus Christ came at the exact right time in terms of the Roman Empire, Palestine, Israel, Jerusalem, in terms of the growth of trade routes, in terms of the growth of literacy. Everything exploded right when he came on the scene 2,000 years ago. So I find that very interesting. Some people say, well, why didn't he come today? You know, him and Elon Musk could really work well together. Elon Musk is going to be a trillionaire in 2027, right? Well, maybe he could have used Elon Musk in a different kind of way. So we don't ultimately know, but I believe historically it made a lot of sense why he came when he did. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this episode. Hit that subscribe button. We love for you to join the family. Also, want to invite you to our church in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's New Canaan High School and it meets Sundays at 9:30 a.m.